right, Trisha, thank you so much for joining us on the Great Retention today. I have a ton of respect for you as a leader, and I'm just really excited to just to get your insights, to hear from you and how you're navigating everything remote work, culture, engagement, and all the growth that you've had. So thank you so much for being on with us today.
Yeah, John, thank you for having me. I'm actually really looking forward to this conversation. So, this is a privilege.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. Maybe let's start with, for our audience, other CEOs, leaders. Just give us a kind of an overview of Belay. Tell us about the business, how many employees. I know that it's a remote kind of distributed team first model, but give us kind of an overview. What does the business look like today?
Yeah, so Belay is a virtual staffing solution, which doesn't sound like a big deal today, but it might have been 12 years ago when we started. So we were founded in 2010 as one of the first organizations that really went to try and find solution for leaders who needed remote work. We started by offering virtual assistant solutions. We offer financial and bookkeeping solutions, website management solutions, as well as social media management solutions. So we were founded in 2010 as an all remote organization back then. And we still are 12 years later, a completely remote organization. We've grown tremendously over the last 12 years. So today we sit at about 140 employees and about 1,700 contractors. And those are our VAs and bookkeepers and social media managers and so forth. So we have the opportunity to really employ almost 2,000 people right now, which is an honor and a privilege. And we've done it all remotely all along.
Wow. Okay. So 2010, being remote first, I don't think that most leaders were thinking about being remote in 2010, right? And then now, this is expected, forced almost, right? Through the last couple of years of the pandemic. So, um, uh, tell us a little bit about the culture of Belay, right? So tell us about just being remote first, how that has impacted just how you approach culture. Are there any lessons learned, and also what does culture mean to you as a CEO and leader?
Yeah, culture is really one of the founding principles. When we started this organization back in 2010, I was the first employee and one of the founding employees of the organization. The goal was really to create a place where people wanted to come to work. It was to create the non-corporate work option, if you will, and to
Yeah.
do so and provide something that was really, really flexible. Myself and the founders had young children at the time. We really wanted the opportunity to be able to work from home and be more present in our home life. But we also desired to have great careers and great work opportunities. And we felt like there was a way that you could really create an environment where you could do great work, meaningful work from home and still be really connected. And that was like the founding idea for the organization back in 2010. And so we've worked really hard over the last 12 years to modify and evolve what that looks like. And it's changed and it has evolved. And we learned a lot of things over the last 12 years about how to have a good culture when you're remote with a growing team and thousands of employees. And so there has been an evolution with culture. But today it is probably even more important than it was 10, 12 years ago. People are really looking for work with great purpose, work that they enjoy. They don't want to do the grind. They don't just want a paycheck. So we feel like we offer that solution, and we're super intentional about how that has to show up. And it requires a different type of leadership, if we're being honest. It
Mm.
requires a lot of intentionality and a lot of care into your team members, understanding that creating a place where people enjoy coming to work actually breeds excellent performance. People that love their jobs and are happy to show up on Monday morning, they give you the best of themselves. And so you see it show up in the organization as awesome results on the tail end of all that. So from our perspective, it is win-win.
Yeah. So Trisha, I was listening to your podcast, which I love, by the way, One Next Step, and you shared a story. And so one of the things that you and your guests were talking about was some of the best team building experiences that your team has had, and how meaningful it was to actually bring people together, right? So absolutely, you have this, distributed teams, kind of remote first environment, but you were sharing how meaningful it was still to have that sense of, connection, right? And those relationships. And I think you were sharing about, the story of giving folks a budget, doing a karaoke kind of skit, and seeing how creative people got. But talk to us about like what your experience has been in terms of being distributed remote first, but still figuring out ways to be intentional and to care as a leader, but to kind of still create that sense of connection.
Yeah, we've definitely done some fun things. We'll hit on that in a minute. A lot of that
Okay.
ties back to our core values. So one of
Okay.
our core values is actually fun. And
Okay.
so we don't like to take ourselves too seriously. And we feel like that, that is a mantra for us at work. Work is work and it's awesome, but we shouldn't take ourselves too seriously. So we make sure to build that into what it means to work at our organization. And sometimes that means getting silly. And so we actually plan at least 4 times a year as an organization to do some fun, interesting team building activity all together as a corporate team. So we get our entire team together 4 times a year in person. And we spend probably at about a quarter of that time. So if it's one full day, we'll spend about 2 hours of that day doing some kind of team building activity that represents our core value fun. So we've done karaoke groups, like you said, where we put people together in teams, and we put people together in teams of people they don't normally work with day to day.
Mhm.
So we didn't put the whole sales team together because they all see each other or talk to each other frequently. We put a salesperson with a finance AR rep, right? So we created these groups of people who would not normally have the opportunity to work together in the day to day, put them in groups and gave them a budget and gave them a song and told them to show up or we're going to have a lip sync battle. and
Love it.
and they really showed up. I mean, they showed up and we just laughed, and we had prizes that we gave out to everybody, and they worked really hard. And we've done things like a field day where we put group of teams together and we did a good old-fashioned field day. Everyone got matching t-shirts in each team, and again, each team consists of a group of individuals who wouldn't normally work together. Each
Yeah.
team had their color, and we did, water balloon tosses and hula hoop competitions and all the things, because we feel like relationships and connection at work breed great culture, and great culture breeds great engagement, and great engagement breeds awesome results for the organization. So what that means is just a lot of planning. I mean, we have our HR team and our executive team have conversations about our culture all the time and how we plan our culture. So, what are these times we're going to get together in person? What is the purpose of that time together? What are we hoping people leave that time with? And for us, the answer has always been, we don't want them to leave necessarily with more training or more clarity on a process. Like, we can do that every day on Zoom. So we look at that as an opportunity to really have them leave motivated, connected, inspired, and just thrilled to work with a great team of people, and re-energized and connected back to each other. And so we plan those days accordingly. So we don't talk about processes, and we build them as like a mini culture conference inside our team, and we do that 4 times a year.
Interesting. So two things that I wanted to dig into a little further. One is it's making sure that you have kind of this cross team kind of mixing
Yeah.
going on, right? Because I guess, sometimes people will just naturally kind of gravitate to folks they know, or you go to a networking event and like the first thing you do is you seek out the person, right? And
Right.
so sales, finance, everything in between, And so you're actually assigning folks ahead of time. Is that fair
Yes,
to say?
yes, yes. We
Okay,
even assign where people sit at what tables
interesting.
methodically.
Okay,
Hmm.
interesting. Okay, so that's a good, I think, key takeaway just to remember, right? Like, yeah, no, we want to make sure folks are mixing who don't normally get to talk to. So I love that. Um, so here's something. So tell me your thoughts on this, because I hear from some leaders, it's like, you can't plan culture. It's somewhat organic and you got to let it kind of happen, right? But at the same time, to your point earlier, you want to be intentional, right? And you want to make sure that, the experience it's just a great experience for your team, and you're creating those relationships across these teams and so forth. But tell us a little bit more about that planning. It sounds like this is something that you're spending is a really big priority for your leadership team.
Yeah, so I think, the interesting thing about culture is culture does create itself, but is the culture that's creating itself the culture you want to create? And
Hmm.
so that's where the planning comes into play. A group of people together will create their own culture if left to be, whatever that culture will be. Now, you come in and you interject core values and plans and intention, and then you get to shape and mold the culture. Because without the shaping and the rails to the culture, it could go off the rails, and
Right.
you wind up in unhealthy culture places. Unhealthy culture organizations are probably organizations where there's no rails on what is the culture. And so, really, yes, culture will create itself, but is it the culture you want to create? And
Right.
so, we as leaders are very thoughtful in defining what is the culture we want to create, what are our core values, and then how do they literally show up every day tactically. And so, like, they can't just be like, oh yeah, our core values team. Okay, so anyway, how about that sales funnel? How's it looking?
Right.
So what
Right.
does team mean? Team means we're going to get everybody in a room. We're going to integrate people. We're going to let you meet the team. We're going to have committees and things we do that encourage team. And so, creating plans for with which your core values live and breathe is shaping your culture. So that's what I would say about it, is that you actually do shape it. And if you don't do anything about it, it'll shape itself.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's thinking about how do we bring these values to life, right? In the day to day. I love
Yeah.
that. It's not just, posters on a wall. And in your environment, there is no wall, right? I
There's
mean,
no
you're
wall.
virtual,
There's
right?
no
So,
wall. Yeah. And
okay. So, yeah.
anti-culture, and being big advocates of anti-culture. So anti-cultural things will show up in your organization, and you've got to squash them
Tell
quickly.
us more about that. So when
So, like,
you,
anti-culture, for us, we have certain guiding principles at our organization. One of them is we have, and I'm going to use this as an example, we have a no gossip policy, because we think gossip is harmful. It tears people down. It's typically misinformed. It's unhealthy.
Mhm.
So we have a no gossip policy. And so our
Yep.
policy is, if you have a problem with something, bring it to somebody who can help you with the solution, either your leader or human resources. But talking to a peer or somebody in another department about something you don't like in the organization and they can't help you solve it, that's gossip to us. That's not
Right.
a productive conversation. So when we hear that those things are happening, we immediately jump in and rectify that situation and redirect people. We've actually lost team members over gossip. Gossip is like, the one sour apple that can spoil the entire bunch. And so that's just one example that's anti-cultural for us, is that we are positive people who support each other, and we don't talk rhetoric or negativity about people or teams or processes. So if we hear it, we address it because it's anti-cultural.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. So it's being thoughtful about here's our mission, here's our values, here's what we stand for, but it's also being observant if things are happening that, like you said, off the rails, right?
Yes.
That you've established there. So that kind of goes into my next question, which is, congratulations, by the way. And Belay has been growing consistently for a very long time, and so obviously, there's some secret sauce there that I wanted to just uncover a little bit. And what I'm hearing from other leaders, and you've touched on this about the intentionality and having, a sense of purpose and values. But what I'm hearing from some other leaders is they talk about this concept of their employee value proposition, or an EVP. And so, and even I've heard leaders say that they want to re-recruit their people on a day-to-day basis because somebody else is out trying to recruit them, right? And
Yeah.
so I wanted to kind of get your thoughts. What is this secret sauce for Belay? How have you been able to, be remote first, still have that culture that people are passionate about, and just really reinforce, I guess, the why behind why is this meaningful, that what I do every day at Belay. So just curious, what are your thoughts on that, the secret sauce?
Yeah, there's probably a couple things compounded in there. So, I mean, for
Okay.
sure, for sure, having the right people on the bus, the right team members is number one. And that goes from all the way up to, your officers down to, your frontline employee. Is we have to have the right people, and they have to be performing, and they have to know what it means like to be successful, and they have to be engaged, at their core. So those are the things we look for. You have the right people on the bus that are engaged, and we do measure engagement. And so, like, we send out engagement surveys. We monitor how people are interacting
Mm,
with each other, even remotely. And somebody's not interacting, that to us is a sign of disengagement. And so you want an engaged team. You want them to have the right skill set, and they're performing. So everybody in the organization has a KPI that they're measured against. Even my executive assistant, my assistant has KPIs. KPIs are
okay.
not just for leaders. KPIs are for every individual here, so they know what winning looks like in the day to day. And then people want to show up and win. People want to know they're actually doing what you've asked them to do, or exceeding that expectation. So having clarity around that. And then honoring it and showing gratitude for when people do that. So one of our other core values is gratitude. And so we have programs around gratitude. So we have frugal wow programs, which mean anybody in the organization can send a gift to anybody else inside the organization to thank them for something that they may have done that had impressed them or served them well, even if it's cross team or leader to employee or employee to leader. We even use it for our clients and our contractors. So we want to be generous with our gratitude, and all of that starts from the top. And so me as CEO, I make it very intentional to show up every day thinking through, if I've represented every core value this week somehow in front of this team of people, am I modeling the behavior that I want the team to model? So I think there's a lot that goes around, modeling great behavior, having the right people. Are they engaged? Are they performing? You're constantly measuring that, and tools
Yeah.
to measure that frequently is
Yeah.
huge. And then, just from a growth perspective, we believe in being really innovative. We believe in taking risks, um, big risks. And that's part of business. Big risks equal great reward if done well. And sometimes they don't work, and that's okay. You learn a lesson and you move on. And so I think the big risks we've taken to try and do things nobody maybe's done before. When we did this back in 2010, people laughed at us like, you're doing a virtual what? And what are you even trying to do here?
Yeah.
So that's afforded us the opportunity to keep growing, is that we keep thinking, like, what can we do that's not being done? What is needed in the market? We pay a lot of attention to that. And we have an amazing team of people who care a lot about Belay continuing to be innovative in the staffing industry. And that's what keeps us on the Inc. 5000 list, is that we just keep pushing to be innovative and new. We don't want to be stale and old. We don't want to be 2010 Belay. We want to be, 2025 Belay. And so we're always looking ahead at how we can be better tomorrow than we are today as an organization and every team member here.
No, I love, so a few things, you share there. So one, you talked about creating a winning culture. Like people
Yeah.
want to win, but what that requires is clarity around what winning looks like.
Right.
And I've heard feedback, if if there's ambiguity about, their role, how they have impact, then that creates disengagement. That's when I guess the culture can go off the rails. So I really like that idea of, hey, are we creating a winning culture, and do our people have clarity on what that is, and having a KPI for a key performance indicator for
Mm.
everyone. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
if it's the assistant to the CEO, everyone has that, right? So I
Yeah.
love that. um and I know that I'm just thinking about our own team, how important, and how I can just reinforce clarity, as much as possible. So I love that. That was something I think that is super helpful. And then you talked about gratitude, right? It's appreciating, it's celebrating when people are able to win, right?
Mm.
They're all in, they're making it happen based on that clarity and that KPI. So that was another takeaway. It's not just creating the KPIs and the clarity, but then it's celebrating those small wins. And it sounds like you've got some examples where you're enabling people to actually send out a thank you gift, right? So
Yes.
that's really cool. And then the last thing that you shared, that I just kind of stuck was, I'll say it in my words: it's being a leader worth following.
Mm.
And it's you having, as a leader, kind of some self-reflection, like, hey, am I living this out? I guess I've learned, Trisha, that as a leader, you have a level of influence, right? And people see what you do, they see how you respond, what you say to that customer or that partner, and so forth. And so I have to look myself in the mirror every day and, hey, am I being a leader worth following, right? Am I living out our own values? So those are some really good takeaways that I took. I took from that. But that winning culture, creating clarity, then celebrating those wins, right? And then having that constant, look in the mirror kind of moment for myself as a leader. Yeah, I'd say that's definitely some secret sauce there.
Yeah, yeah. And the looking in the mirror part, you have to do it frequently. You have to
Mm,
do it frequently. And typically when there's, there will always be gaps in your business. You might find an area of business that's just not functioning the way you had hoped it might. Or there might be something, there's always going to be something happening inside of an organization, and then I will always look back to myself and say, did I miss the mark somewhere? Did I not show up in a certain way for that team? Did I miss something? So
yeah,
constantly evaluating. And that's how we evolve as leaders, is we can't be the leader we were 5 years ago. We have to be the leader we need to be 5 years from now if we want to,
yeah,
really be afforded the honor to keep leading. Is the way I look at it. Is if I want to be afforded the honor to keep leading Belay into the future, then I should be constantly reflecting, like, am I the best CEO for this company? Am I paying attention to all the right things? And it all rests on the feeling and the sentiment from the CEO and how that trickles down into the organization. So there's a lot of weight with that, but that's the
yeah,
job, in my opinion. You
yeah.
wear that weight. Yeah.
That makes sense. And so to your point, and I'm going to kind of lead into our next question here, which you mentioned, as a CEO, am I paying attention to the right things? Am I, seeing what these trends are in the market, how we look at the next few years? And so, lots of buzzwords going around right now. Over the last few months, it was the great resignation, people looking for a different role for a variety of reasons. Perhaps with economic uncertainty, maybe there's less of that, but now we're hearing this buzzword around quiet quitting, where maybe they're not leaving their job, but they're just saying, hey, I'm going to do enough to not get fired, type of thing,
Mhm.
right? I think that in any of these cases, it comes down to disengagement and not having that alignment, or feeling, that level of connection, to the organization, mission, values, and so forth. But what have you seen? What have you seen related to the great resignation, related to quiet quitting? Are there things at Belay where you've are doing to navigate that? Are there any
Mhm.
lessons learned, or anything that you can share, with other leaders listening today?
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely have seen it. I mean, to your point, I feel like it's started to settle down a little more now than it was maybe a year or so ago.
Mhm.
What we took away from, the last season of 2 years in staffing is uh, people kind of the finding purpose in their work and enjoying work and having satisfaction in their jobs has become super amplified more than it's ever been. I think before, 5, 10 years ago, it was like, well, I'm showing up to work and I'm doing my job and I'm getting a paycheck and it's fine. And,
Mhm.
and that was okay for the majority of people. But I think today it's different. I think people are like, there is this thing where I feel like I can do great work and there could be purpose behind it and I can feel appreciated at work. So engagement and appreciation at work are more prevalent than we have ever seen them. And so we for sure combated some things through the great resignation when it came to, salaries and things like that. A lot of people were like, well, hey, I can go do the same job elsewhere. I'm being recruited to go do it for twice as much. And we see a
Right.
lot of organizations really swooped in to try and recruit great talent and offer them a lot of money. And we said, that's just not sustainable as an organization. Is you pay great talent what they're worth, but of course, what the job is worth. But to have purpose at work and feel connected to people at work is actually more meaningful than any paycheck anybody's going to get. So through it all, we actually amped up our culture initiatives from our HR department. So we've amped up a lot of initiatives that we would have offered that are more perk based and connection based than we did even before COVID and the pandemic. So we have Be Well initiatives where we get our teams together if they want to do like a 5K together. We do group workouts online, tracking time, step challenges as a team. We
Yep.
will do, so we have this, if available and you want it, these opportunities for people to engage. We've instituted a D&I committee if that's important to you. So we've really added additional human resource type opportunities for our team to engage in the organization that are outside of their role or their work at Belay, but to engage them as people. And that has created great engagement. Now, to your point with the people going silent or dark or disengaged, that is always an indicator for a problem for us. And it should be for any organization.
Right.
First of all, anytime somebody's disengaged, and maybe you think it's okay, well, they're still getting their job done. But
Mhm.
like, are they really? I mean, at what capacity? Are they doing it 80%, like enough to get by and fly under the radar? Or are they literally giving you 110% and doing the best job? Because that affects everybody around them, that affects the team, that affects their peers, that affects their leaders. So disengagement to us is honestly unacceptable in leadership here. And I think, what we do to combat that is we have great managers that are trained and we invest in so that they are really in tune with their teams, and engagement for them is super important. So our management level team are really responsive and engaged with how the team is showing up, and it's part of what they're responsible to do is ensure
Yeah.
that their team members are engaged.
I was actually going to ask you on that point, what are some of the warning signs, if you will, when you start to see kind of that disengagement start to pop up? Are there anything that come to mind that perhaps might be a red flag? You mentioned the
Yeah.
surveys earlier, that you were doing.
Yeah.
But anything that comes to mind on that?
Yeah. So we do engagement surveys twice a year. We shoot
Yeah,
for 100% participation, of course. Then you have a
sure.
fully engaged team.
Yeah.
We usually land about 95%. And we consider that winning. So,
Okay.
of our employee team base, and you have to decide what those markers are.
Hmm.
What percent of your team is even completing the survey? If somebody doesn't complete a survey, they're not engaged. Even if it's the most harmless survey, like, hey, how was the event you went to last week? Hey, what do you think about our staffing meetings? Easy surveys. Non answers are red flags. We also have like engagement platforms, which most organizations probably have. For us, we use Slack. Somebody might have, Google Chats or a
Right.
place where our remote team can engage with each other inside. Um, we have channels in Slack where we celebrate birthdays and we celebrate wins and we celebrate if there are people that are not engaging in those wins, they're not commenting happy birthday, they're not
Yeah.
celebrating with you, we hit this milestone, yay, those would be things that we would go, huh, I
Okay.
wonder what's going on there. And then we have other things that are mandatory. So we have like mandatory weekly staffing meetings where our entire team is expected to be on a Zoom and are
Right.
expected to have your video on and engage in the meeting. And so we actually monitor engagement in those meetings. Did somebody not show up? Did somebody have their video off? Did
Yeah.
somebody not participate? Sometimes we'll do Zoom polls. So there's a lot of little warning signs that can all add up. And sometimes they're nothing and sometimes they're something.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting kind of going back to this remote distributed teams environment versus kind of maybe what people have been used to in terms of identifying disengagement. So you're, referring to, okay, interactions on Slack or other, communication channels or on Zoom within team meetings. So it's an interesting, it's different indicators. It's different, I guess, observations than perhaps people have been used to in the past. One other point that you made, which was interesting, I thought, or what I've heard is people are being offered these ridiculous salaries, or they were, but
Mm-hmm.
what another leader told me, those are the first companies to cut people when
That's
times are
right.
bad, because it's not sustainable, like
It's
you
not
said.
sustainable. It's a
And so,
bad business strategy. We never participated in it.
yeah, yeah, no, it makes sense. And the other leader, he was sharing, hey, I'm happy for you, just beware,
Mm-hmm.
that might be the first thing to go, when bad times go the opposite direction, right? But I really loved how you said at Belay, you doubled down on the connection side, the people side, right?
Yeah.
And just reminding people that that's the specialness, right? Is to be part of a community. And it's not necessary. Obviously, the salary is important. Like you said, you want to pay people
Sure.
well for the job, but that's the values, the mission, the connection that I think is really important to in my opinion, retention
Yeah.
and
And some
engagement.
people, truly need a different salary for their life, and you will lose those people because it doesn't align with what your,
Yeah.
strategies are for your budgets. But and that's okay. I mean, there's a level of healthy churn in your employee base that you should expect. Not everybody is going to stay,
That's a
you
good
know?
point. That's a good
I
point.
mean, and you probably don't
Yeah.
want them to. I mean,
Yeah.
healthy churn is healthy churn.
Yep. Yep. No, I agree with you. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Well, so Trisha, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for just sharing your insights, your experience, just kind of lessons learned as you've navigated these things. So as we wrap up today, is there one, practical piece of advice that you can leave the audience with, leaders with, that perhaps they can go and just implement, at their organization and their teams? Is there one takeaway that comes to mind that you can share as we wrap up today?
Yeah, I think, the piece of advice I would give that aligns with this whole conversation is truly the evaluation of what your organization's stance is on your culture. Is it clear? Is it defined? Is it written down? Do you have a culture statement? Do you have a culture plan? Is it written down on paper, and then does it show up inside your organization? So if you feel like maybe it's a little wishy-washy and it's leading itself, then I would say put the guardrails on it, get together with your team, who are the most important people, maybe that's your leadership team or your HR professionals in your organization, and really define it. We defined it really early on. We were like 8 people organization, and we were defining core values and what they meant and how they showed up. So that would be the advice I give. And with that, once that's defined and it shows up, the rest will come. The results will come when the team is engaged.
Love it. Thank you so much again,
Thank
Trisha.
you.
This has been wonderful. So excited to have the opportunity to learn from you today. And but thank you again for being on the Great Retention.
Thanks for having me.